The year was 1972. Los Angeles was buzzing, not just because of Hollywood glamour, but because of one man who had turned the entire world of martial arts upside down: Bruce Lee. He wasn't just a movie star, he was something the world had never seen before. A 5'7", 135-pound Chinese-American man who moved so fast that cameras had to slow down their frame rate just to capture him on film. A man who could throw a punch in 5 milliseconds, faster than the human eye could process. A man who had already made some of the toughest fighters in America feel deeply, genuinely uncomfortable. But not everyone was impressed. In the back room of a private gym in Los Angeles, a group of men had gathered. Most of them were connected to the military world. Hard men, men with scars, men who had seen things that would make ordinary people's knees buckle. And seated among them, arms crossed, with the kind of confidence that only comes from surviving things most humans can't even imagine, was a Navy SEAL. His name isn't important. What matters is what he believed. He believed Bruce Lee was a performance, a show, Hollywood smoke and mirrors dressed up in a kung fu uniform. He had watched Bruce's movies. He had seen the spinning kicks, the lightning-fast punches, the perfectly choreographed fight scenes, and he had laughed. "That's not fighting," he told the men around him. "That's dancing." Someone in that room knew Bruce Lee personally, and someone in that room made a phone call. Bruce arrived at the gym quietly. No entourage, no cameras, no dramatic entrance. He walked in wearing a simple white t-shirt and track pants, carrying nothing but a towel. He looked around the room, nodded at a few faces he recognized, and then his eyes settled on the Navy SEAL sitting across from him. The SEAL stood up slowly. He was bigger than Bruce, broader shoulders, thicker arms, the kind of body built not in a gym for aesthetics, but in jungles, oceans, and combat zones for survival. He looked Bruce up and down the way a lion looks at something it's not sure is worth eating. "So you're the famous Bruce Lee," he said. Bruce smiled. Not a nervous smile, not a polite smile, the kind of smile that made people in that room shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I've heard of you," Bruce replied simply. The SEAL stepped closer. "I've seen your movies. You know what I think? I think Hollywood made you. I think without the cameras, without the editing, without the special effects, you're just a little Chinese man in pajamas." The room went very quiet. 8 people were in that gym. 8 people who would later describe what happened next in almost identical terms as one of the most extraordinary things they had ever witnessed in their lives. Bruce didn't respond immediately. He just looked at the SEAL with those calm, slightly amused eyes of his. Then he set his towel down on a nearby bench, very carefully, the way you set something down when you know you're not going to need it for a while. "Show me what a real man fights like." The SEAL didn't need to be asked twice. He came forward fast, and he was fast, genuinely fast, the kind of speed that had made him deadly in actual combat situations. His first move was a grab, a powerful, experienced grappler's attempt to close the distance and take Bruce to the ground where size and strength would matter. He grabbed nothing. Bruce had moved, not dramatically, not with a spinning kick or a battle cry, just a small, impossibly precise shift of his body, like a matador letting a bull pass. The SEAL's hands closed on empty air. The men watching held their breath. The SEAL reset. His eyes sharpened. He wasn't embarrassed yet. He was recalibrating. He was, after all, a professional. He had been in real fights, real life-and-death situations. He adjusted his approach. He came again, this time lower, faster, with a feint designed to draw a reaction and then exploit it. What happened next, every one of those 8 witnesses would struggle to describe coherently for the rest of their lives. Bruce Lee's hand moved.
Not a punch exactly, more like a vibration, a ripple in the air that ended at the center of the SEAL's chest. It wasn't theatrical. It didn't look like the movies. It looked almost gentle, the way a surgeon's cut looks gentle, precise, controlled, absolute. The Navy SEAL, a man who had been through Hell Week, who had completed combat missions in places whose names were still classified, who had trained his body to operate beyond the limits of normal human endurance, sat down on the floor. Not knocked down, not thrown, he simply sat down, the way your body sits down when it suddenly forgets the argument it was making. He sat there for a moment, blinking.
The room remained completely silent. The Navy SEAL was sitting on the floor of a Los Angeles gym, blinking. A moment ago, he had been one of the most dangerous men in America, trained by the United States military to operate in conditions that would break ordinary men in hours. Hardened by combat, by cold water, by sleep deprivation, by years of pushing the human body past every limit it thought it had. And now he was sitting on the floor. Bruce Lee was standing exactly where he had been standing before, towel still neatly folded on the bench behind him, white t-shirt without a single wrinkle out of place. He hadn't moved more than 2 feet in the last 30 seconds. Something passed across the SEAL's face in that moment. The witnesses would later describe it differently. Some said it was shock, some said it was confusion. One man said it looked almost like relief, the relief of finally understanding something you'd been wrong about for a very long time. The SEAL got up slowly. He stood in front of Bruce Lee for a long moment, saying nothing. Then he extended his hand. Bruce shook it. "What was that?" the SEAL asked quietly. And now his voice had changed entirely. The bravado was gone. The challenge was gone. He was asking a genuine question, the question of a student, not a challenger. Bruce Lee looked at him with that same calm expression he had worn since the moment he walked through the door. "That," he said, "was the punch you didn't see coming because you were too busy looking at the punch you expected." The SEAL stared at him. "Again?" Bruce asked, simply. The SEAL shook his head slowly, not in defeat, in understanding. He had felt something in that contact that no amount of explanation could fully communicate, something that told him clearly and without any room for argument that he had been playing a completely different game than the man standing in front of him. Of the 8 people in that room, several went on to train with Bruce Lee directly after that day. One of them, a former military instructor named Ted Wong, became one of Bruce's closest students and one of his most trusted training partners. Wong spent years afterward trying to teach what he had witnessed in that gym, often telling his own students that he never fully succeeded. Bruce didn't fight the way other people fight. Other people fight the body in front of them. Bruce fought the mind behind the body. By the time you realized what he was doing, it was already done. Another witness, a man with a background in wrestling and boxing, described it this way. "I've been around fighters my whole life. I've seen fast people. I've seen powerful people. What Bruce had wasn't speed in the way we normally understand speed. It was more like he had already finished the fight before you knew it had started." The Navy SEAL never spoke publicly about that day. He requested that his name never be attached to the story. But people who knew him said that something shifted in him after that afternoon. He never again dismissed martial arts as performance. He never again assumed that the size of a man's body told you anything meaningful about the size of his danger. And according to one person close to him, he spent considerable time in the months that followed studying Bruce Lee's philosophy of combat, not to replicate it, simply to understand what he had encountered. Bruce Lee died the following year, in 1973, at just 32 years old. He left behind a philosophy, a body of work, and a legacy so vast that 50 years later, every serious combat athlete on the planet still measures themselves against him in some way.
Every UFC fighter, every special forces operator who studies hand-to-hand combat, every martial artist who has ever stood across from another human being and asked themselves, what is the most efficient way to end this? He was not a movie star who pretended to fight. He was a fighter who, almost as an afterthought, also happened to make movies. There is a difference, and on a quiet afternoon in 1972, in a gym in Los Angeles, with 8 witnesses and no cameras rolling, a Navy SEAL learned that difference in the most direct way possible. Some lessons you can only receive in person. Bruce Lee asked himself one question every single day of his life. Not, how do I get stronger? Not, how do I get faster? Those were the questions everyone else was asking. His question was different. What is the most efficient way to end a fight before it begins? He spent his entire life answering that question. He filled notebooks with the answer. He drilled the answer into his body 10,000 times. He refined it, rebuilt it, stripped away everything that wasn't essential until what remained was something so pure and so precise that even the men trained to be America's most lethal warriors walked away from it with their assumptions shattered. And from what 8 people witnessed one afternoon in Los Angeles, he had found the answer. The only question is, are you paying attention?